Studies have shown that highly talented talent may be looking right now. Is that the case for you? Or are you a company that's worried about losing your top talent? So join Roxana and me today as we dive into how to retrain your highly talented employees in a highly competitive market. All
Yeah, I
right.
I always love this. I mean, see, that's one way of starting the day.
Hi,
So,
everyone. Roxanne, I don't know the kind of week that you have. And again, because we're all about bringing the human, I'm just going to share. I had the case of burnout. You and I were talking before the show. And it does relate to our topic today because burnout is really when you lose your motivation and you're not engaged about something. And I started to feel that way in what I do. And I started to kind of think about is why? Why am I feeling this way? Right? You know me. I get up at 5 a.m. I try to do work. I have a 40-hour contract engagement and I squeeze every bit of work that I can do between the mornings, the evenings, and the weekends. And I just kind of topped out. And I lost my drive.
yeah.
Now, when we talk about top talent in today's show, um, you have people that are working in organizations today, something is creating their personal burnout, right? And it could be they're wanting to advance in their career. They're just not as interested in the work. They're not as challenged right now, right? It could be a variety of reasons. And I love our topic today because
Yeah.
we're not going to take that traditional approach where most people address it to like an HR thing or an organizational thing. We are actually trying to be creative, saying, hey, you as a manager, how are you creatively working on this situation? Because it's really your problem, right? You're the one that is going to lose this highly talented individual, or it could be a couple of individuals. Who knows what's going on out there right now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it can be the whole team, and I love the this approach. And you know that where don't expect HR or someone else to be the one that actually motivates and engages your team. Because that's not what should happen when you're managing and leading a team. First of all, know what makes you motivated and engaged, and find out what helps them feel motivated and engaged, because it's all about that. It's not, and I know that we have talked about this so many times already, but it's not just about top down solutions. Okay, here's this, do it, and then you will have your team engaged and motivated, because that's not how it works. It's all about creating the environment where they feel engaged and motivated so that you keep them.
And let's talk about waiting to create it in your environment. Uh, if we wait for the perfect, then change
Exactly.
never happens.
Yeah.
And so one of the things as an agilist we always talk about, even just in the teams or the team of teams of what I do is what are you empowered to do? And a lot of times we have to creatively get them to think about different approaches that aren't necessarily quite linear. And so
Mhm.
we've read a couple of articles that were out there today, and I thought that this was quite interesting, where the one thing that we should be really highly concerned about your top talent is they are marketable, and
Yeah.
these are the ones that people want to poach, and they know they have options, because most of the time these are the people that are working and keeping up with their personal brand. They know what's going in the trends out in the market, and they're probably continuous learners and upping their game, right?
Mhm.
They're not the people
Yeah.
that don't look at their resume and they haven't looked at it in years. These are people that most likely are already on their A game because they're highly motivated and they're already interested in advancing. We know that in the millennial generation, they're the ones that are rising in the leadership ranks. And based on the studies, they are not as patient as the Zennial generation and older like us.
Yeah.
That if they don't get what they need or want, they're going to go look for it elsewhere. Period. And it's
Yeah.
just a amount of time because they're probably looking right now. And they might not necessarily communicate this to you because remember, they don't like conflict, they ghost.
They don't like conflict. And again, it's also a matter of, are you asking them? What do you know about them? What do you know about what they appreciate in working with you? Because here's the what I find interesting, and there was one of the articles that we were reading on the topic. Um, Actually, you can't tell how engaged a team member is just judging their performance. Performance is not an indicator of engagement. They
Or
can be performing at super high levels and feel miserable.
yeah, there's a big difference between being engaged and actually being motivated. You can be highly engaged but not motivated, and you can be highly
Exactly.
motivated and engaged. What you want in the secret sauce is you focus on motivation first, which naturally will give you the productivity where engagement tends to fall. One of the things I thought was quite interesting is I witness this a lot as being an agile coach. So as we read a lot of articles, we do that because it gives us ideas. We actually see these firsthand in our engagements or the things that we do. So Roxanne, you talk to a lot of managers that are probably talking and experience about that happening, especially over the course of 2020 and now in 2021, where people are gearing up. I have random conversations all the time with people, either in past engagements, current engagements, or gosh, even in my Pilates class, for crying out loud. And they basically said, I just decided I don't want to do this anymore, and I'm changing it. And some of them have gone back to school. Some of them basically kind of reimagined their career a little bit. Like maybe they dialed down and decided to like change their workflow. Or there's a lot of people looking for remote first culture jobs. Like the resumes, I had a conversation with somebody that actually specializes in distributed agile. That's his niche. And he's like, I wouldn't be surprised that these companies out there, the resumes are stacked up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's really poaching territory. Now here's what saddens me. I've already said this. I could, like, tears are just coming down right now. Is that I looked at the job boards and I was really surprised of the volume of companies that didn't indicate in their job posting that virtual was an option. And so they're only advertising local, I guess is my point. And it's now July, and I'm very curious as we round out the back half of this year, what kind of pressures, as every time you probably see another company decides to be remote first and allow more choice, the numbers keep adding, and also the people might be leaving. Now we know that the
Yeah.
highest number of entrepreneurs are millennials, so they might not even be going to another job. They might actually just be quitting corporate world altogether. I met a lot of people that actually have gone this path in this last year and last year. That there might be some pressures that are happening. So if we don't think it's an issue, we're not there yet, folks, is what I'm trying to say. We're not
And
there.
we're not there. And I think first of all, one of the biggest mistakes we can make right now is not learn from the past 1 year and a half. Like, not apply what we've just learned. I
What
mean, that would
what are you
be
talking
how
about?
sad. How sad would that be? I mean,
Because they
think
wanted
about
to
it.
go back the way it
It's like,
was.
why would you? I mean, exactly. And the way it was, being stuck in that way it was, whatever definition you have of it, is that might be a new definition of insanity. Because, right, because it's proven, if something happens the way it was doesn't serve you. If something external to you, if another crisis happens, just having things done the way it was is not going to help you. So you have to get back to what you had to put in place during this past year and a half to make things work. So why not think about long-term solutions rather than, oh, it's easier. And what I see again, another mistake is just going back to, oh, the admin stuff, which is, but we don't have the job descriptions in place, but we don't have the rules and regulations in place, but we don't have the policies. And the question is, what's stopping you create those policies that actually help you implement some of the good stuff that you can actually bring into your company right now, and that gives you access right away to more talent that helps you bring the right fit into your organization and help them develop and retain them so they can contribute. Like, why are we not learning? Because we only have that framework that's old. Is a framework going to stop us? That's what I don't understand, and
Yeah.
that's why I think you're also feeling sad about
Yeah.
going back to the way
And
things
those
were.
are the cookie cutter job postings, which usually HR is involved. So let's talk about some creative ways. And the reason why I like to think about the full cycle is because who you attract and what you attract them for has a direct correlation of retention.
Yeah.
Because if you actually hire the wrong people for the role, then you have a likelihood of not retaining them, or really thinking about what that actually looks like in an experience. Most of the time we're short-sighted. We only think about solving what we need at the given moment, and we're not very strategic, thinking, okay, well, once I have the person, what does that look like a year from now, right? Or what might have you.
Yeah.
Because if you are a good interviewee, you would be asking is, what are the, offerings of advancement or what might have you. And if you don't have those types of answers, if you haven't really thought about it, you might be losing those opportunities for those types of people. But let's think about this. Now, in a job posting, you typically have to follow the rules that are guided for that posting. And most of the time it runs through HR. But we know today a lot of jobs, in truth, could be from networking. We know that the platform that we get most of our views on here on LinkedIn, is a great source for networking and actually finding talent that you not necessarily always need a job posting for. So again, I live in the gray. Here's where I challenge managers to start thinking about is, one is, have you looked to find people outside of the restrictions of how you might need to post? Yes, you might have a posting, but that's a technicality. And have you thought about the gray of what that might look like to attract that talent and while they have you? So like I've had lots of conversations with people and managers where they have an agreement, just because it might not have been on the posting or whatever, that they actually can work 2 days from home or what might have you. There's actually some flexibility in there. And so that's why I said you don't knock it until you actually talk to someone in an interview. You might get what you want. I always recommend that with people. But if you're the other end as the manager, you can start thinking about, what is your gray that you're allowed to play in? I always love the gray that they didn't say you couldn't do. And they didn't say you can do. And
Yep.
so it's a space to play in. And one cool thing when we talk about attracting, there's actually language that you can use in a job posting that will attract certain people, by the way. So as we talk about these creative approaches to attract and making sure you attract the right person, retaining them is going to be where we talk about the servant leadership, the things that you talk about with in your lead for legacy program. By the way, great program, everyone. That, you know, to be a leader today is really to be a mentor and coach.
Yeah.
And so people don't quit companies, they quit bosses.
Yeah, they quit bad bosses, really. They quit the bad bosses. I mean, people who don't know what team leadership is all about. And the thing is, that's a skill that you can learn. And people will always appreciate a leader who has that growth mindset and wants to learn the how. But what I also wanted to say, when you talked about bringing the right people in your team, first of all, make sure that you as a manager know how to do that, that you know enough about the team members that you already have, what they bring, where you want to go, your strategic goals, so that when you bring in somebody new, they align with the rest of your team already. Because if they're a bad hire, that's not going to just affect you as a manager, because then maybe 6 months from now you're going to have to hire somebody again and train them and all of that, but they're also going to affect your other team members. And chances are, the risk is, and it's a very big risk, you bring in someone who's a bad fit in your team, and you have other people from the team leaving who might be highly talented,
Yeah, because
who
they
might
created a
have been,
toxic environment.
because they, exactly, and then you're gonna be stuck with the bad hire while the rest of the team is leaving. And because this happens, that's gonna affect your team reputation, your reputation as a manager, perhaps even your reputation as a company. So that's starting from hiring the right fit for your team, that is crucial. And there's a number of ways in which you can do that. But again, make sure that you know enough about yourself, your team, and your outcomes. What are you bringing a new member of the team in for? What do you expect from them? What impact do you want them to make? Because that's going to be crucial in developing them, and then in retaining them and potentially attracting new talent, because you're gonna have that reputation. Oh my God, this team is amazing. This leader is amazing. I what I wouldn't give to work with them. And then you're attracting talent effortlessly. How cool is that? And it's just by knowing how to bring in the new team members in the
And
first place.
I would say the most challenging thing that companies have, which is the number one thing why people leave, is advancement opportunities.
Yeah, yeah,
And so if you're a small business that you're growing, but you're not necessarily growing on an advancing perspective, you're growing more,
yeah.
like I would say, out, right, versus up.
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult situation. But what really is advancing? And I think this is sometimes a mindset is the only way that I feel that I can advance is actually I manage people, when maybe they're advancing is a pay advance, and it's not necessarily a leadership role, but because the way that things are situated, or the way that we have that's I'm not saying this properly, um, that's where we naturally go. So I'm going to
Yeah.
use myself as an example. Advancement for me was never about being a manager. I actually cared less about that. Advancement for me were two factors. It was increasing the things that I did to challenge myself and grow. And it was the money factor as well, right? Because I invested in myself, and I still do today, always adding to my arsenal of continuous learning, that I increased my value because I put some skin in the game to it, that I wanted it to reflect. Now that value can look different to someone. And so this is why it's so important to have a conversation with someone to really understand what are they truly motivated about. Because at the end of the day, if you are able to offer something that could be more valuable than what you naturally would go towards. This is why you have to have some of these qualifying conversations with individuals and find out what actually matters to them.
Yeah.
Maybe if you actually gave them an ability to work from home, they would stay. Or maybe you gave them something different to do, right? And challenge them. Or if you don't have the funds to do continuous learning, maybe you give them the time to actually do it so they don't have to take time off of work. That's a win-win, right? Like there's so many creative things that we have to think outside of our normal container of what is in our HR guide to offer existing employees. And also, I'm going to include contractors because they've already done the studies that freelancers and contractors are great people to keep. You can either do long-term retainer, which some companies do that, or they can convert, right? Sometimes you can't convert them because they like the idea of freelancing. But they're highly adaptive and can ramp up people, and they're pretty independent in a lot of ways because they're used to being that way. And you can give them benefits as well in the situation. So it's really about, at the end of the day, creatively thinking about the gray. And I'm going to keep saying
Exactly.
that because you
I
have,
love that.
because today you have to live in the gray. So if you're a
Yeah.
manager and you feel like your hands are tied, maybe you need to talk to a game changer and think of all the possibilities of what you can do in the world of the gray. And because there's a lot of gray because I've had managers. I've most of the companies I stayed with, I never stayed because of the company. I stayed because of my manager. And I've had managers that pretty much sheltered me from the shit. I'm going to say it that way. And they made sure that I did fun projects or I did whatever to keep me, and I was highly motivated and engaged because of it.
Yeah.
And I never thought twice of leaving because I was like, I got it made. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I didn't, and so like I would talk to my other peers, and they were miserable. Different boss, different situation in the company, and I was clueless what was going
Yeah.
on because I was
Yeah.
in my bubble with this awesome manager.
Yeah. I agree with that. And it's funny that you bring it up because I was talking to one of the managers in my group program, and she's the kind of manager who fights for her people. And what I tend to see right now is a lot of managers looking at finding out how their people feel motivated and engaged, how to help them stay, how to make them feel included, how to really tap into that potential. And at the same time, so they do all of that, they're looking for solutions, they're looking for options, and then they go to HR. And
Boom, boom, boom.
that's where the
I had
discussion
to
is
say
like,
that.
talk to the hand, because we don't have, no, it's not in the policy, no, it's not, I have no box to tick, no, can't do. And then imagine how frustrating. So you've tried all sorts of strategies and solutions to keep people in your team, and then you can't because of a technicality. So that is,
And you wonder
at
why
the
they don't
same
go to
time,
HR because it's almost like ask for forgiveness, don't ask for permission.
right? But then when it comes to like, can I have this person work from here, but then they're working with somebody in another country, or work from another country, but they're working with us here, or why not help our team still work remotely because now the kids are on holiday and there's no way that you can take them anywhere because summer camps are closed, or that kind of reality check that you need to do as a department, as an HR department, let's say, so that you can align what you can offer to your people to help your managers actually help retain that talent, because that's what they're trying to do. And I think the what I also see is the more managers do that, the more they're going to influence how things happen, and they're going to be able to influence even how we're making these decisions and what policies do we need to change. But if we're not working towards that, if we don't try to influence some decision making from that manager level, you don't have to be top exec level. You can still do some things, because the more you have the mass, right? You reach that critical mass where actually I can influence how things
Nothing
are done.
stops a manager to collect their own data about the
Exactly.
employee
That's
experience,
number one thing that
because
you should do.
my father
Exactly.
my father was in HR, and one of the things that helped create change was data. And so he always spent time, running data to prove theories of how to actually change policies.
Yeah.
And so if you can partner with them and kind of shorten that cycle, because they're going to have to do it anyways themselves. It
Yeah.
just usually that's how it works. That's why there's a lot of HR, people analytics today.
Mm-hmm.
And so you as a manager, nothing stops you from gathering your own insights about your employee experience and be able to actually show the impact. You can even do a financial analysis of the impact of what's actually happening within your department, right?
Yeah.
If you're a department
Exactly.
lead. And so there's a lot of opportunity. And again, this is being creative of thinking about all the different possibilities. That's why I said, if you're not a game changer by nature, go attach yourself to one, because it's always looking in the gray. It's always looking at the options that you may or may not have thought about. Now, I'm kind of one of those people. Yeah, I live this. We're risk takers, right? So I'm more of, has anyone ever thought about doing this, or what's the kind of rules in that? I never really say what I'm going to do, but I'm actually poking to see, and then I just go do it.
Yeah. Or what's a different way of doing this? Like, have you
Right,
thought
but I
about
don't
it?
tell them what I'm going to do.
Exactly.
and
Typical.
yeah, but well, yeah, because otherwise they're just going to shoot it down, right? What,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
what do people naturally do to game changers when you talk about an idea? If they don't
Uh,
understand it, they shoot it down. So
exactly.
of
We don't
course
have
I'm not
time
going to
for
do
this.
that. So it's a very natural thing for me. But I know these things are possible because I've experienced it. You might have experienced it. You talk to people that actually are living and breathing and having these experiences. So we're not saying something that is so outlandish that doesn't exist today. Managers have been doing, the ones that actually get it. And it's really about knowing your people, spending the time, and creatively thinking of ways, if you truly want to keep them, you can't say my hands are tied. You're at cause for the amount of energy you put in keeping your employees. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've had tons of conversations in all the agile engagements that I've had, where I've had private one-on-ones with people, and they say, yes, I talked to my manager and they weren't helpful at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can
Because
tell you
they,
right now, a lot of them switched departments, either
yeah.
while I was there or after I left, or they
Yeah.
left the company in general.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I see that very few managers actually think about. How can they influence more people around them? How can they influence that kind of decision making that affects their team? Because if you start from thinking my hands are tied, and then um, these are the rules that we have, and then there's nothing that we can do about it, it's not even, what's the point of me even asking the question, then obviously nothing will happen.
Well,
um,
the person actually goes, well, what's the point?
it's
And
exactly
guess what? They're already looking for another job. It's a
yeah.
question of when. They're
Yeah.
either going to move to a different department if you're a larger organization,
Yeah.
because they don't want to leave the company, or they will literally leave the company for another job.
Yeah. And then
I have these conversations all the time.
all the time, right? And then be transparent, because what happens when you actually start to have these conversations with people in your team, and one sign is when they actually come to you and they tell you, hey, I think I'm going to start looking because I'm not happy here. That's a great sign. And have that
Actually, you're
conversation.
lucky if they actually
Continue.
tell you that.
Exactly, because
Most of the
that
time, if you
means
get
they
to that
feel
point, it's too
safe.
late.
That's so true. So that already means, hey, they don't want to leave. That's why they're telling you, because maybe there's a way that you can help them stay. But that already that tells you that you created that kind of environment in your team where they feel safe to come and tell you this. And then you can actually do something about it and let them know, have this conversation. Okay, so let's see what we can do. Let's come up with a strategy together. How can I help you? Let me try and see how I can help you. And then if I can't, at least we agree, hey, this is the best that we could do. And that's it for you. That, I mean, you're welcome to go somewhere else that makes you feel more fulfilled. But that closes the conversation in a healthy way for both of you. For you as a manager, it helps you feel like you've done your part and you really helped as much as you could. And then for
Even
them as well, because they'll remember you.
well, the Brit, as my father always said, don't burn your bridges. The
Exactly.
bridge is not burned.
Yeah.
Who knows? They might come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Who knows? You might go somewhere else, and you might seek them out.
Or they
So
might bring you where they're going, right?
yeah, you never know.
Who knows?
And here's something that, I mean, let's just put the elephant in the room. A lot of times leaders are promoted, or I should say people in management positions are promoted based on the results they get, not necessarily because they're good with people. And so this conversation that we're having could be very challenging for someone if they're not a people person, and it exhausts them. So what do you do in that situation? Because you're not going to necessarily want to engage in HR always, because again, we talked about the shackles, right? And we're trying to creatively find ways that you may be hesitant to involve them. So what do you do? And this is where, if you are a manager, it's always good to have, I would call, the buddy managers. If anyone has a buddy system, I think managers, especially middle management, because they get it the worst, should have a buddy system.
Yeah. Because that's where you can share the challenges, the successes, and the knowledge and the experience and the learning and the solutions and everything. It's like the learning journey is so much richer when it's shared and when you learn from each other.
But a lot that I have observed, and this is not all, that it's something they don't do because they don't want to look like they're not qualified to be the manager.
But then they struggle with exactly this problem, and it's constantly on their mind, because I see a lot of them like very insecure in their potential to lead people, in how they're leading people, in what they have to do next, in how they're talking to people, in from, I don't know, leading the team meeting to emailing the team or emailing team members, or not to mention giving negative feedback or having difficult conversations, because that is like, as much as I can avoid it, let me avoid it. Let me just pretend it's not there. So it's constantly there, and it's eating them from the inside out. And that, what that actually does is have them really want to have that kind of, let me control everything and everybody, because I'm afraid I'm going to lose control otherwise. But I'm not looking to learn ways in which I can actually delegate and start trusting my people. And that's how, what gives me more authority without actually having to take control over everything and everyone and feel, making them feel miserable every day.
So as we wrap this up and really talk about, let's just sum up some of the things that we talked about in steps and things that you can be doing. Because I think those of you that are the task oriented and want the steps and processes, they're probably like, oh my God, what are they? What are they? So let's we did put some pieces in this conversation. So let's wrap it up again. So we talked about, in the highly competitive market with the top talent, they want to advance. And so number one would be is to really understand what they value in that advancement, right? What's their vision? What's their goal in their career? And really understand where they want to go. Because somebody's advancement might be different than someone else. Like, again, my advancement had nothing to do about being a manager.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
And I wanted to also say, because we start from hiring the right talent that goes well with your team and your organization and with your goals. Because
and
otherwise,
values.
yeah, right?
Because that here
Otherwise, it's gonna
another
be
thing
painful.
of highly talented people, they, if they're not in tuned, they get in tuned, and they might not even be able to put their finger on it. I actually had a conversation with a highly talented individual, and they were thinking about, okay, I'm getting the itch. I'm not challenged. Should I leave or should I go? And I said, well, have you ever
Okay.
done the exercise of doing your personal core values? Like, we talked about this in the last show.
Mhm.
If you had 6 months to live, what would you do? Now, a lot of people have been doing these exercises in the last year. This is my point. That if
Yeah.
they start to realize and put the pieces together, the pattern, that there's actually a conflict.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? Because that's really hard to resolve a core value conflict with the company and what you're doing. So,
Of course.
it baffles me, especially with core values as a company, core values maybe as you as a manager, that you don't lead with that when you are hiring, to make sure that aligns. Because when you have that conflict and it's out there and it's known, that's a tough one. What do you do
Yeah.
with that?
You can't change it, like, for sure. That's why you need to know what your values are, and based on that you're going to hire people who align with your values. Otherwise they're not going to stay no matter what you do.
And another tip is really about growth and learning.
Hmm.
Top talent likes to continuously learn. And so, what are you doing? And it doesn't always have to be a monetarily thing. You're not creatively thinking, folks, that you are helping them grow and learn. Sometimes it might be just pairing them up with somebody or planting them
Yes.
in a different situation, and they consider that learning, because now they can put that experience on their resume, or they can do X, Y,
Mhm.
and Z. You never know. So again, these conversations are really important, and creatively thinking about what that continuous learning. Most top talented people are always learning and advancing themselves.
Yeah.
There's a reason
And if
why they
you
got where they
ask,
were.
exactly. I mean, and if you ask them, really, like, how often do you ask them? Again, don't, as a leader, don't try to come up with all the solutions out there. Ask your team and you will see how many solutions you're getting from them.
And that's the final thing is, if you're a manager and you think you have to come up with all the answers, get curious and ask the questions. They might actually have them for you.
Yeah, exactly. So, what we wanted to do as well is get some help from you. So, what we're going to do is put a link to a survey in the comments below, as we're creating these episodes and the show, and we want to invite more guests to talk about topics that are relevant for you, and we're putting together content that's important for you to talk about, and discuss some solutions together. So we created this short survey for people who lead teams, because we're both very keen on helping
Yeah. So
teams work
we
better
will.
together.
So those of you that are watching on the platforms, we'll definitely have it in the YouTube, our library arsenal, because that
Yeah.
is a static library
Mhm.
for all of those. You can find that there. And then, of course, in the LinkedIn profile, which we air via mine, we'll have that in the comments as well there. Those are,
Yeah.
at least by default, we always have things in those two platforms. If any of you are watching the
Mhm.
show and you're trying to find something.
Yeah.
But yeah, please, definitely take the survey. We really want to understand, um, you know, what are some of your challenges? What are the things that you're interested in? And maybe it might be a topic that you kind of want us to bring up, but because you're not really wanting to talk about it with others, we're okay. Roxana and I are natural disruptors, so we bring in topics all the time that maybe sometimes people don't want to talk about. Now, speaking of a common topic, but I think it's an interesting one to always put a twist of what we're going to talk about next week. And guess what? We've also decided that we're going to dedicate Wednesday, but we're going to play around on our time. So we're not always going to do 12:15 anymore. So next week, we're actually doing 11 a.m. We're going to try to keep Wednesdays, and we're going to experiment to actually poke around and see. I always say nothing always has to last forever. And so our time is going to move around. But again, if you are following us, you could always go on YouTube. You have it on here on the LinkedIn on my profile. You always will know when we're going to have it. So, and again, if you miss it, you can watch the replay. Next week, we're talking about, there's our changing work YouTube channel. So next week is about the creative culture shaping. And this is really going beyond the stats. Now, where we sit is not always necessarily the big, gigantic, hairy problem of organizational culture shaping. Roxana and I always like to go into the space of the layer below and thinking about creative ways that you can do your culture shaping. Remember, we are a system of systems, and we're basically saying within your system, what can you do to start culture shaping and going beyond stats? What are those things beyond that? Because stats are the real popular thing that are out there today. Important, but there's so much more.
Yeah, not the only thing. All right. So we'll see you next week. Don't forget, 11 a.m. Eastern Time with some creative culture shaping.
And be there or be square.
Thanks for watching, and
Bye-bye.
bye for now.